Powwow's not just about dancing. It's a way to be together. My mom, she won't miss it, will she?
Your mom ever missed a powwow? She'll be there.
Congratulations on the film. I loved it so much. Beautiful story, beautifully executed. I'm excited to talk about it. To get started, Erica, please tell me about the process of getting this film picked up by Apple for distribution. I know it was a long fight, and I know both you and Lily had championed the film for a long time. So tell me a little bit about what it was like to be picked up by Apple and what that means to you now.
Yeah, it's been, indie filmmaking is always filled with its obstacles and challenges, and making Fancy Dance, was no different than I think the normal indie experience. We were so grateful to have been, premiered the film at Sundance. We took the film itself through all of the Sundance labs and had so much support there. And, we walked out of that festival and out of South by Southwest with, a lot of critical acclaim for the film. And, we were riding high on our Rotten Tomatoes score, and we had the audiences showing up, and, we just didn't have the offers that we thought would come along with like hitting the checklist of what it takes to make a successful indie film. And so I think it was just a year of digging deep and like believing in the film. And I'm so grateful to have sat alongside an incredible producing team. We knew what the film would mean to audiences. We knew that we had, Lily Gladstone and Isabel Deroy-Olson holding these two beautiful performances. And we knew that audiences, as we were going through the festival circuit, were really responding to this film. And so, last year was a very fraught time in our industry with the strikes and with everything kind of like realigning with the streamers. And so we just were patient. And we knew that we would at some point reach the outcome that we knew the film deserved. And we just dug in and we just kept raising our hands and saying, hey, we've got this film. Hey, listen. And then, of course, I think the linchpin to the whole plan to get this film out into the world was Lily's continued advocacy of the film. And of course, the beautiful moment that she and all of the indigenous cast and crew of Killers of the Flower Moon had last year, and that wonderful visible moment that they were all having, and Lily using some of that shine to aim at Fancy Dance, I think was critical for us. And we're so grateful to be where we're at. It's the perfect ending. It's the dream ending. It was always gonna be the ending for Fancy Dance, and here we are. And the film will now be seen, and Cayuga will now be heard in over 100 countries around the world. And I just couldn't be prouder or more excited about where we've landed.
I do want to speak about Cayuga a little bit because I know from my understanding, it's a very difficult language to learn. So Isabel and Lily, I'd love to hear about that process. Is it correct that you did 2 weeks of language immersion to prepare? Tell me a little bit about what that was like.
We met the first day and we started working on the language, and it was definitely a very daunting thing because we just cared a lot about it, and we cared about getting it right because it's so important to so many people. And it's not our language. We didn't know anything yet, and we had those days where it got kind of overwhelming just because, we didn't want to let anybody down. So Lily and I showed up to set just in tears.
Yeah,
and we looked at each
independently,
other.
we each got there already crying because we were convinced that we were going to fail the other one with our Cayuga.
And then it ended up being
Fine.
a really lovely scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's such an important part of the film, especially for the two characters, because it gives them that isolated space that's really comfortable with each other, and it holds a lot of love for both of them, and it's really an act of resilience, an act of community to speak your own language. And it's just lovely that we got to for the film.
It's a revolutionary thing. Before my film career started doing much of anything, a lot of my acting work was dedicated to working in community using methodology developed within the Theater of the Oppressed by Augusto Boal, largely working with indigenous communities and learning gameplay and ways of communities interacting and solving problems together. But in one branch of the Theater of the Oppressed is forum theater, and a big part of that is a community of people who then become actors, and then become spect actors. So it's a way of putting shared oppressions and shared grievances on stage for everybody to see outside of themselves. And kind of the theory behind it is, you can share stories in the world as they are exactly, or you can create stories of the world as you wish it were, as you want to see it, because then it becomes a communally shared goal that's tangibly presented in a way that feels like it's here, it's existing alongside of us instead of in our minds and our hearts. So in reality, there are less now than 20 Cayuga first language speakers left in the world. They're elders. When we were filming, there were over 20. Now there's under 20. You don't see in a modern setting like in our film, and especially not in Oklahoma, Seneca-Cayuga women of my generation, millennials, speaking to Gen Zs or alphas fluently, comfortably, by choice in the home, for privacy, to convey certain ideas and concepts that don't necessarily sit as well or beautifully in English, so you choose to speak your language instead. We don't see that in reality, but creating that very real world on screen, showing it to these elders who grew up with their language and watching each generation drop it more and more. Now we're in the age of language revitalization, where you have kids going through immersion programs. Our teacher is a teacher at the language immersion program in Six Nations, Kisa Parker, and she's kind of shepherding and stewarding this same group of kids through their entire education in Cayuga. And they will reach a point where they have fluency. And then it's up to them how they want to use it and how they want to integrate it into their lives. So having a story where they see a girl their age, when they leave school, they'll be Roki's age, speaking with her auntie, getting to kind of talk openly in front of a cop and in front of her grandparents that she doesn't want to be open with yet, showing that there's a very sacred space for her to articulate herself in her language. Kids will grow up watching that and just accept it as reality, the way a lot of times we do when we're forming identity by watching ourselves on screen or watching stories we project ourselves into. So it really is a revolutionary act to portray language in this way. And it was so important because of that, that Isabel and I speak it in a way that those first language speakers could hear it and could see a scene performed in it. It was the same task we charged ourselves with in Killers of the Flower Moon. The difference was that film had the budget and an entire language department behind it for several months. So the actors got a very long time to acclimate to it. In the world of independent filmmaking and people's real world schedules, Kisa was teaching full time and had a little break in the summer to translate our lines. And we got them when we got there, and we learned it on the fly. And a lot of repetition, a lot of commitment to making sure that we were learning the concepts and thoughts in the lines so we could perform them instead of just recite them. And that act in and of itself is something that I've always, before I thought my acting career would become an acting career and I was still a performance artist, I really felt there was a space in language revitalization for performance. Because if you can articulate emotion, if you can be creative in a language, you're more likely to use it outside of the classroom once you acquire it as a child.
Lily, I'd also love to hear from you. I know you said that you and Isabel had the best chemistry you've had with a scene partner on screen. So I'd love to hear from both of you on how you built up that relationship ahead of shooting and while you were in the process of making the film, and what made you so compatible.
It was just immediate. I don't know if we could really say what makes us so compatible. We have a lot of the same makeup. Ironically, we both have a ballet background, so we move in a similar way. we both come from cultures that practice Sundance, and we both participate in Sundance, and that gives you a certain worldview and a certain pace with just the way the world moves. I guess you notice things in the same way. We have a shared sense of humor. You know, we both spent significant amounts of our lives. I grew up on my reservation, but my adolescence was in an urban location. Isabel lives in Vancouver, so it's like we're native girls in an urban setting and can navigate that space, but also know how to exist and be on the res with our family. There was just a lot about us that I'm sure Erica recognized was copacetic and compatible. I think it still, like, you know, our first rehearsal when we were kind of getting comfortable with each other and just expressing our own isms, you know, Isabel-isms, Lily-isms. They were a lot of times the same, with the same cadence, the same tone, and like it was just a like constantly kind of looking at each other like we're mirroring each other right now. This is weird. And I love in the film, like one really clear example of that is the gas, stealing the gas, the bait and switch. We couldn't see each other. We had this pump between the two of us that's big. And, you know, this was an active business. People were coming in and out of like the gas stations on either side of us. You know, we had our little like cones up to carve out our space, but we were kind of just like running and gunning it with that scene. So we didn't really have time to rehearse or make it look like it was something we'd done a million times before. In my head, I'm sure she's over there like doing it her way, I'm doing it my way, and it's kind of like going like this. But then you watch it later and it's like going like this, and it's like it looks like a choreographed piece. And I think just that natural intuition that we have for how the other one moves, and that we got to build that through the fancy dance rehearsals that we had and learning this choreography together for the fancy dance part of it, that kind of physical, quiet, unspoken language between family members is what makes it feel lived in. Like, I mean, Leo and I took a lot of time to develop that language that a husband and wife would have. And we were, you know, when we had chances with it, he was learning how to help me in and out of my blanket. He wanted to look really fluid with that, but we had to do it all the time before we got there. Isabel and I just snapped into the language of a family that knew each other so well, effortlessly. So different kind of love story that's so glad has gotten an entire feature. You know, it's a love story that sustains culture across millennia.
Something that you just touched on, I loved that gas station scene. It really made me laugh out loud, and I think that's something that I really admired about the film is this levity and these moments of humor that are baked into this otherwise heartbreaking story. So motion sensors. Could each of you kind of just briefly touch on why that humor piece felt like an important part of this story?
I mean, even with Roki, she's so young, and so she's just this beacon of light and hope, and she brings that joy with her into every scene, you know, like there are so many heavy moments in the film and important moments in the film. And I think it's hard sometimes as actors to not get stuck in that. And so with all of us having a pretty similar sense of humor, you know, we brought that behind the scenes too as a way to kind of lift each other up. And that's so true in all of our communities. You know, we like to laugh with each other. And I think that showing that both on and off screen was really important to us.
And something that was so beautifully unique about this production was the majority of the crew was Indigenous as well. That crew came together largely around reservation dogs. There was a lot of people that were first time on a set working on res dogs, but 2 seasons deep at that point had developed such a flow with it, such an specific way of moving and working together as a team. It felt like walking into a family that was a really well-oiled machine from day one. And there's something so irreplaceable about that. Like everybody on set who was non-Indigenous was a hell of a good ally because they just knew how to be. and knew how to just kind of be cool in that setting, be comfortable with that, and to adopt some of the Cayuga language into the process of our set. The set calls were translated into Cayuga and everybody used them. And some of the crew members who were non-Indigenous but doing this for the first time, like our first AD is a non-Indigenous woman, but went on to her next project still calling Cayuga set calls. It was just such a beautiful environment and a safe environment to create in, and it lent itself to that humor because it's a bunch of Native folks being together, telling stories that are really personal, really difficult. You would be very hard-pressed to find any Indigenous person in North America today that is not touched by an element of this story very personally. We all know an MMIP. We all know a kid that was raised outside of community through not their choice, not their family choice. It's something that we all collectively kind of grieve and work to fix and work to improve and, work to keep ourselves together. And the way you do that, and I feel like the way that we've survived, centuries now of like attempts at total genocide, attempts at our complete erasure, we stick together and we survive through it by being funny, by finding humor in it, by, speaking of like that foundation Isabel and I both have in Sundance, there's like, you get a different sense of a timeline. You have a greater sense of a larger timeline of all of existence. So everything feels a little bit more digestible, and you can find humor when you're focused on a big picture because you're part of something so much longer and bigger and older than yourself. It's your traumas are there and there's ways of addressing them, but you're part of a community and you're part of a much bigger picture, and having some levity around it, having a way of processing it and continuing on, it keeps you in you want to stay in a circle that you're having fun in. You want to keep that circle strong. You want to protect it. It's precious. It's at the heart of everything.
Yeah, and I think for us it was really important for our characters to just feel real and feel lived in, and that was important. But I think it's also important that you give your audience a chance to take a breath, right? Like we're expecting them to go on this like kind of like really tough journey with these two characters who are going through a lot. And one of my favorite things is to sit in an audience and hear them laugh. Because it's very, it's challenging to get an audience to laugh, and it's very rewarding. And, I love those moments. And Roki is particularly funny, like when she's got the sewing machine, like sewing as loud as she can because she knows that Jax is hung over on the couch. And one of my favorite scenes of the whole film is when the two of them kind of couldn't be further apart emotionally in their relationship right after they've, experienced this traumatic event with the ICE officer. And then in typical Roki fashion, to try and like bring things down and just to try and reconnect with her aunt, she's like, hey, guess what? I just bled all over that cop's car. And I just love that moment because it feels so real. It feels so Indigenous. It feels so emblematic of how we navigate our own spaces together and how we come back together in connection through laughter and through joy. And, you have to keep joy, you have to keep laughter, and you have to keep optimism in order to survive an ongoing genocide. And that's what these two characters are actively doing in this film. And it was beautiful to see them act those moments, and I love getting to laugh at those parts of the film now. And yeah, it was it's fun. It's amazing to laugh with these women.
I know you've each done a lot of work with MMIW, either through your art or as advocates. So Lily, could you briefly just tell me how you see your work as an artist in tandem with your work as an advocate, and how storytelling can really further a cause like that?
I think especially with a film like this, and with a film like Killers of the Flower Moon, that was an introduction to a lot of audience, a large audience of this ongoing epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous people. It's something that we deal with so much. Erica said it perfectly yesterday. We can't go on social media without seeing a missing persons call to action or a missing persons poster. It's a new teenager. It's a new person every day. And it's the relief that you feel when that poster goes back up a few days later saying found. You're like, good, because a lot of them don't. So for us, it's nothing particularly new. And a lot of the work that I think is done about it does happen in those spheres of social media posts. At some point, I know people who do this advocacy. I mean, my character Jax is named for Jax Actuga, who works with the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, the grassroots Native woman-led organization that created the first database of missing women, missing Indigenous women. The FBI didn't have that. The FBI didn't put the resources into even creating a list of names. It was Indigenous women who did that. So I feel like with a film like Fancy Dance and the way that Erica and Michiana drew it, coming from families of strong woman leadership that often are the ones who lead these tasks and lead the charge and go into the belly of the beast to get our sisters, to get our people, to bring them home. Erica and Michiana just created this world that it's not shoved down anybody's throat. I think by being and embodying a character, a person who's going through the steps of doing that work, you're inviting the audience into that perspective, into that world where they get to learn about the jurisdictional loopholes and the inequities in society that are creating the obstacles for the characters they're rooting for. So suddenly the FBI having sole jurisdiction on reservations over these kinds of cases becomes an obstacle for a character you're rooting to overcome that, and you learn about that obstacle in a way that you have a desire to change it instead of just hearing about it in a PowerPoint presentation or as a talking point on a news segment that you're going to fast forward through because you're more interested in what the the score was for your team. It's when you sit with a narrative, you really get brought in to a world in a compassionate way. And I love that with Fancy Dance, even our villains are humanized. A lot of our audience will recognize themselves in who the villains are in this story. Well-meaning people who don't realize that they're part of a larger, aggressive force of colonization, how they're actually getting in the way of the well-being of these women instead of helping. So I think a lot of activists I know find strength in art, and that's one element, because there's something you can point to that people will have an emotional reaction to, will go on a journey with. And then the hard work of compiling those list of names, suddenly, for every Jax Goodiron, for every Towie Goodiron on film, there's a Kay Sarah Stops Pretty Places in real life. It's real. We've created a fictional world to tell a very real story. And, it's just speaking power to all of these women, all of these girls, all of these people, and the ones who are here doing the work and the ones that we're doing the work for.
Thank you so much for all of your insightful responses. I appreciate the chance to speak with you all, and congratulations.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.